Alright, what's good, guys? It's your boy No Name. I'm coming to hit you with some quick information. I just want to talk a little bit about damage scaling in the game. I'll probably do a full gearing talk later, but I really want to talk about damage scaling first because it's just the one that's most pressing on my mind when I think about how people are scaling their characters and some information that has not been fully corrected in the spotlight yet. I just really wanted to hit this important piece because I feel like you're scaling your characters wrong, or not wrong. We'll go with wrong, just in terms of stat prioritization and when you should prioritize those stats. So the best way I can give that example is when we talk about crit stats, for example, right? So this is my sword. Don't mind all the full stat, fully geared out character and whatnot. I want to talk mostly about crit for a second, right? I'm going to use crit to talk about a bit about the full example that I want to talk about. So we're talking about crit scaling on a character. You usually say you need X amount of crit chance and crit damage for it to really be worth it, right? So like I have a little bit of crit, about like 50 something percent here alongside 30% crit chance. And so that has an effective value of a damage increase that it's providing me, right? And that's a pretty important stat to understand. It's like, how much are you effectively getting from having this investment? Let me get my calculator out here so I can show you what I mean. God damn it, the calculator ain't working right. There we go. So we talk about the crit scaling, right? So let's just say, make numbers easier, 30% crit chance, 100% crit damage, right? So 30% of the time I do 200% of my damage, right? So that's about 60 from that effective portion. And the other 70% of the time I do my usual 100% of my damage. So when I add those two numbers together, we get 70 plus 60, we end up at 130, which over my usual 100 means that my crit investment is currently giving me about 30% more damage, 30% multiplicative damage increase, right? And so that's something that we talk about. Or we look at vulnerable damage, for example. Let me get this out of the way here. We see vulnerable damage. This is 33.4% damage. So this is like literally just raw damage increase against vulnerable damage. It's incredible. It works beautifully like this. And so that's one step of like, okay, these stats are great. Now, we also know that the stats have a diminishing return when they are additive with itself, right? We thought you guys have seen either pre-release discussion about damage buckets, or if you haven't seen Riker's video about damage decks, I'll actually drop the link in the description to that video. I think it's just a good visualization, a better concept explanation of how this bucketing system works, or how the groupings of damage types work together. And you'll learn that there are things that add together to diminish the effect, right? If I tell you that you have 20%, so the base value for vulnerable damage, for example, is 20%. So usually, no matter what you do, 20% more damage against vulnerable targets. Now, if I get a stat that says add 20 to that, add 20 vulnerable damage, like you see here, this says 31.5, for example. Let's just imagine that says 20% vulnerable damage, right? So now I have 40% vulnerable damage. I do 40% more damage to that target. That's not a 20% damage increase over what I already had, though, right? If I go from doing I'm doing 1.4 times the damage now instead of 1.2, we're actually only at a 16% damage increase, right? So that's a thing that I want you to get used to thinking about. That's the diminishing returns of a stat when added on top of itself far enough. 16% damage increase at another 20%. And as you start layering it further and further on, right now I'm at 133.4%. So that's 2.334 times the damage. Let's say I added 20% onto that, right? So instead of 2.334, it's 2.534. And I have 2.334. Now I'm only gaining 8% damage from that increase in 20% vuln. And that's still a lot of damage to get. But you see how that 20% has gotten worse and worse over time as we add more. And so the similar thing can be said when we talk about all the damage scalings in those decks. Again, watch that video if you haven't at some point. I just think it'll make this make a little bit more sense. But I want to talk about the stats that all add together and the misconception. So when you read guides and you listen to people talk about the game, they're going to talk about how important crit is and how important vuln is. And they often really just kind of make it sound like damage took with core skills, or damage with lightning, or damage against close enemies. They make it sound like those stats are so just negligible, right? And It was. When this information was created, it was because if you were paying attention to like pre-release, the Paragon glyphs were a lot stronger. Even in the early access period before the third day, they were a lot stronger. Every glyph in the game received at least a 33% nerf to its scaling values. Right? So for example, let me see if I can like pull up a good example of one. Let me find one that's not leveled yet. Actually, I'll use a level 15 just so I can talk about an even bigger scale, right? So Flame Feeder currently says 7.5% increased damage to burning targets. This number at level 11 previously was closer to 11% per 5 decks, right? And so if we look at what my current tree is with Flame Feeder in, it's giving me 43.6% burning damage. Previously, this would have been, let's see, so this is 2/3 of what it was, or we could just put that in the calculator, but I think it's something around 65%. So divide by 2 times 3. This used to be 65.4% damage. So it just lost 20%. This was minus 20%, right? Or down here, not down here. Down here, you see 58.7%. This also used to be a lot higher, right? This used to be closer to 90%. And so these nerfs were enacted, sweeping across the board, massively nerfing the value of these glyphs. In addition to that, I've noticed that a lot of build guides are made from the perspective of your character is giga maxed out. They don't really talk about your gearing progression, right? What happens when your glyphs just aren't leveled, right? When you only have glyphs that are in solely because they give you a small minor benefit, or their activated benefit, right? Like Territorial's damage reduction, exploits damage because I've been hitting vuln targets, damage against burning enemies, right? Or stacking more damage. When you don't have these percent damage increases, the damage increases you get elsewhere get a lot more important. And that's the thing that's not talked about. Is that when you're in progression, if you're in that range where you're like, let's say level 40, let's say you finished a campaign and you're either progressing to get ready for World Tier 3 or you're in World Tier 3 trying to level up and get geared up so you can do the capstone for World Tier 4, right? When you're in that low gear state, low glyph level state, these percent damage increases on your gear get incredibly important, right? I wish I still had some of my old weapons. I was keeping them around for a little while, but I had to get rid of them to make space, right? But even weapons like, no, that's not my old weapon. That's like my one. But like, this is an old wand of mine. This is a pretty good wand though. Or do I have any other? I don't have any of my old stuff. Wow. Oh, I kind of set myself up for failure on that one. Could have shown you guys some cooler of my older stuff. But a lot of my gear has percent damage. You'll see like double percent damage here. And I think this is a little bit of a throw, having double percent damage. But I didn't hit crit. I didn't want to burn all my gold. Or, here I have percent to crowd control and frozen. Here I have percent to close. I used to have, there's like another piece used to have some on, but I don't think I have that on anymore. But if I look through some of my other gear, like my arc lash gear, you'll see percent damage to close on a trip. Like this is crit, vuln, and percent to close, right? What I'm getting at is that these other stats are still super important. Oh, here we go. Like you see this one right here, right? This is my arc lash wand. Basic skill damage max rolled at its highest affix tier. That's 60%. Like that's still critical amounts of damage, right? If I go ahead and pull this up in the sheet real quick. So let's see, let's look at my damage right now. If I just like thinking about like my arc lash character, I add up close, burning, so about like 223. Lightning is 55. So 270, let's just call it 270. Keep the math simple and quick for a second here. 270, 290. Let's say I'm hitting an elite, so it's actually like 320, right? I'm not gonna say I did this because it doesn't make sense. So we're at 320, right? So that's 4.2 as the multiplier, right? 4.2 damage multiplier. That's a lot of damage. And I just said that thing has plus 68%. So we go 4.88 instead of 4.2. That's still 16% more damage to my character. And so that's the thing that I wanted to talk about here, is that when you do not have these absurd amounts of percent damage scaling from your glyphs, from the rest of your gear, but especially again from your glyphs or the nodes on your Paragon boards, because you might be following these guys that also disincentivize the use or activation of good rare nodes that give percent damage on your tree as well. When you're missing these sources of percent damage, the like large percent damage increases are still valuable, right? Like we talk about, we talk about that 60%, 68% damage increase, or percent damage against close enemies, or basic skills, my bad. And it gives me a 16% more damage increase. Now, let's just say that was the 32% vuln that I'm getting here instead, right? If I had 32% vuln increase on, like, how much is that actually making up for me right now, right? 133, so minus 32, put this at like 113. So 2.334 divided by 2.114, right? The vuln damage, that vuln damage roll is only 10% of my damage. And that's only against vulnerable targets, which again, for my builds tend to be a lot of them. They should be almost every target you hit in these builds, but that's only 10% damage increase. You starting to see what the picture I'm painting? Is that I think that the percent damage stats were just are undersold in their value and utility on characters that are below level 90 and do not have maxed out glyphs. Like, sure, now when your glyphs are all 15s and your board is filled out because you're like 90 plus Paragon with full renown and whatnot, yeah, then start discounting these stats. Then I think it makes sense to be like, you know what? Also, I'm gonna put the calculator, but then be like, you know what? I don't really need the percent damage like that anymore. I now need vuln. I now need crit, right? That's the thing that I wanted to talk about because I don't think guide makers are talking about it enough. I know some are, but I know especially if you're a D3 player, you might still like using like a max roll guys. And I think a lot of people are talking about builds from their absolute ceiling on how to scale the damage and not talking enough about what it's like when you need damage in the mid game. All right, so that's a lot of information to put out there, and it's gonna take. But basically, I just wanted to instill that message that you should not be discarding items just because they don't say crit vuln. There's so many stats that still matter, especially in progression. Like this is a level 80 character. I'm farming like 40s, like 35 to 40 pretty comfortably, and I could definitely go up if I just like went ahead and like tried. If I'm being honest, you know, maybe actually put on some stuff that imprint over some of my weaker imprints that I do have stronger versions of, stuff like that. Like if I just really like went ahead and pushed it, I could definitely go so much further. And that's why I'm leveling my glyphs so I can get some more of that damage that I'm missing. Fix my Paragon board because I have a dead Paragon board on this character, stuff like that. Like there's so much scaling that I'm missing. But while I'm missing that scaling, I'm sad that I don't have percent to core on my wand or percent to core somewhere else, right? Like this scaling matters heavily. And I just wanted to really emphasize that as you guys are going through progression. If you feel like your characters are weak or you feel like, vuln damage, but I don't have that ridiculous uptime on vuln yet. Right. So get damage you do have uptime on. It's kind of the thing. I'm just providing you the tools to make better decisions for yourselves, and to combat some of the information that I think is going around for the wrong people, right? I do stuff like this all the time. I'm going to be making more videos, talk more stuff like this. I also talk about this stuff on stream. If you want to ask some questions or you feel like you want to have like a clarifying point or whatever, check me out at my stream on Twitch. You can come hit me up in the Discord. That's both of those links will be in the description down below. Strongly recommend, contacting me if you have any questions or if you just want to like give feedback. Maybe you have a different take. I'm always open to intellectual discussion because I love talking about the game in this type. And so, we could really push the barrier there. Anyways, that's been this video. Again, do not neglect your percent damage stats. They are just good. They mean a lot to your character. Do not let people tell you they don't. Have a great one. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.